in what is perhaps the most dangerous bit of legislation out of the 2013 legislative session, campaign reform. And let me tell you, there's a lot of bad bills. But to talk about it, Secretary of State Scott Gessler, glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so it was House Bill 1301?
House Bill 1303.
Oh, 3. Oh, then this one's fine. It was the other one. Colorado elections have always been troublesome, but elections in general are troublesome. You know, who can vote, who can't vote, who's on the rolls, who's not on the rolls, how we do recounts. Since it happens only every other year or so, it's kind of messy stuff to begin with. This law changed things so now we have a mail-in ballot. That's it. Everybody gets a mail-in ballot, even if you haven't voted in years. Do I understand that right?
Yeah. You know, Colorado, we actually run pretty good elections compared to other states. We're one of the best in the country. We've got third best voter participation, have far fewer.
I want to stop right there. The reason we're supposed to have mail-in ballots is because we want to improve voter participation. We want everyone to vote. Did I just hear you say we have the third highest level of voter participation?
Yeah. The people who ran this bill, I think, did not do it to help Colorado. Our voter participation right now is the third best in the country. We outperform every mandatory all-mail ballot state. We outperform 6 out of the 8 same-day voter registration states, and we've seen far less fraud than you see in some of those same-day voter registration states. So we're top of the class. We have fewer election day problems than other states, and we have better integrity in our elections than ever before. We still have work to do. But I think the folks in the leadership that pushed this type of bill didn't do it because Colorado has a problem. I think they did it because of a very narrow, I think some would say partisan agenda, and they really shoved it through without listening to anyone who would even consider disagreeing with them. It's really a power play.
This is a huge change to how we do our ballots. There was, I think it was 2004, 2002, I'm trying to remember, a initiative to have all mail-in ballots. The voters rejected that pretty strongly. Now, the county clerks, they like, for the most part, mail-in ballots. Makes their job a lot easier. They don't have to have those nasty precincts and all that other good stuff where you have to keep an eye on all this stuff. You just mail them out and count the ones that come in. What's better about precinct voting compared to mail-in ballots? Well,
precinct voting, it depends, okay? The thing I have is the problem with the mandatory mail ballots. There's about 30% of the population of Colorado does not want a mail-in ballot. So if people choose to have a mail-in ballot, I think that's good. But I think people should choose to be able to vote at a precinct on election day and not get a mail-in ballot. And this bill, sort of eliminates the choice. But, I think there were some clerks and recorders, certainly. Those are the county election officials that went along with the Democratic leadership and, sort of froze out every single Republican. I mean, when you have a 128-page bill, and you won't accept a single dissenting voice. You won't compromise at all. When you rewrite all of Colorado's elections law and you freeze people out, to me that's bad governance. It's a ruthless display of political power that really doesn't care about or is concerned about anyone else.
The other huge change here is same-day voter registration. Let me see if I've got this right. Now, in Colorado, you need to register a certain amount of days before an election. If you want to change your party, you do that a certain amount of days before the election to make sure people don't rush in and take over an election, and also to show that these people are voting on this side, these people are voting in this primary, and that if you want to be part of the process, you can be, but you have to go in before a certain day. That helps us understand who is going to come in and vote. Now that everybody can come in and vote, apparently we don't need that, so we can have same-day voter registration. How does that work?
Well,
who else is doing this?
So there's about 8 states that do it now, and like I say, we outperform 6 out of the 8 of them. And you've seen real instances of vote fraud with a same-day voter registration. Look, we don't put up barriers here in Colorado. It's not hard to register to vote here. It's very easy. And like I say, we've got great participation.
You can vote at the county clerk's office. You can vote at the driver's license bureau. You can register to vote in libraries, there are voter drives, people out with clipboards.
Yeah, for registration, that's for sure. We have online voter registration if you have a driver's license or state ID. But you got real problems with same-day voter registration. In fact, Oregon is the only state in the country that actually had all mail ballots and same-day voter registration at the same time, like us.
Same-day registration, all mail-in ballots.
So Oregon's the only other state that's ever done that.
How are they doing with it?
Well, they repealed same-day voter registration. There was actually a religious cult that swarmed a town on Election Day through vote fraud. They took over the town, and people thought that's a bad thing. So the citizens in Oregon...
I'm starting to get some ideas. This could work to our advantage.
I don't want to give anyone ideas along those lines, especially you. Yeah. But now, so what they did is Oregon repealed the same-day voter registration part of it. So Colorado is the second state that's ever tried this. We've refused to learn from Oregon's lessons. And, and I keep coming back to this. When you look at the leadership in the state of Colorado here, I mean, they shoved through a lot of really contentious bills, limiting Second Amendment rights. They pushed through that. They pushed through, increasing electricity rates for rural Colorado. And now I think what they did is at the end of it, they changed Colorado's elections laws to try and seal in some of their gains. And that's what you're looking at.
Let me be a bit more blunt than that. This is a way to institutionalize democratic victories in elections. This is a way that Republicans can stay in the minority. And I don't understand this, given the incredible majorities that Democrats have, the advantage they have in redistricting, what's happened in the last election, and their incredible victories. Why do we need to do this? How do we? I thought, and this is how stupid I am, I thought we would be having a discussion about election integrity, voter ID, something to make sure that the person handing in the ballot is actually the guy who's on the ballot. Who is meant for, that is. We didn't have that conversation.
No, they froze that out. They're not interested in election integrity. They're sort of ignoring that. And you look at polling, and you don't govern just according to polls, but to get a sense of where Coloradans are, well over 70% support photo identification. And the Democrats, as it were, in charge, they're just not listening to a majority of Coloradans when it comes to that. They're not listening to people who disagree with them, and they are really sort of shoving this through.
So instead of having precincts, and I remember as a kid, you go to the precinct, everybody, these were your neighbors, you kind of knew if somebody wasn't your neighbor, and they're there, you would go in, you'd vote, and it was that day, it was an event. And it also, what I loved about that same-day vote is that everybody had a chance to read everything. That is, a campaign has ups and downs. The Wellstone is a perfect example. You don't know what's going to happen until the election day. Facts come out. Death happens. And now we have mail-in ballots and a few vote centers. If there's same-day registration, what's to stop me from registering in all those different voting centers the same day?
Well, we have a computer system, if we were given time to implement it correctly, that if someone is honest and uses the same name, we'll be able to stop that. But, in fact, El Paso County just had an example. They had someone who registered 5 different times under different variants of his name this last election. And they were able to catch that because they had 29 days to look into it, and they sort of saw some suspicious activity, and they had time to look at that. And so they called the person up.
That's the reason why you have a deadline. Register now. The election's in a month.
Right, and then we have time to check that out. What this does is it sort of strips Colorado of those protections. People show up and they vote immediately, and you're not able to check to make sure everything's correct. And so that's a real problem. And you've seen sort of instances of vote fraud in other states. Wisconsin's one election after another they've had problems, and yet we're going to a system that is worse from an election integrity standpoint, that's worse from a voter turnout standpoint, that's sometimes worse from an administrative standpoint. And why? We shouldn't do it. We already have among the very best voter turnout.
I had heard a statistic. Tell me if I'm right on this. I've heard there are more people who are registered to vote in Colorado than there are people who live in Colorado. Is that true?
Not on a statewide basis. We've got about 10 counties where there's more people registered to vote than there are eligible human beings.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I
And
don't get this.
Well, that's because the bottom line is we have slop in our voter rolls. I mean, there's just no two ways
Isn't
about it.
that just an invitation for voter fraud?
It does create problems.
Right,
so the answer is yes. I mean, there are problems there.
You're okay with mail-in ballots if there's a choice. I hate mail-in ballots for a variety of reasons. This is the very building block of our republic. That vote, that ballot. It is a sacred thing. To fling them in the air like grocery store coupons and stuff them in people's mailboxes is not safe. If you live in an apartment complex, you'll notice in the mailroom sometimes they're just thrown into the trash with the others. They're easy to get up and forge. A signature is not a form of identification. As a kid who signed all my papers and report cards with my old man's name just perfectly, it's not identification. And there's also voter intimidation. A wife who's being threatened by a husband, that husband can't follow her into the voting booth, but he sure can look over her shoulder when she fills out this mail-in ballot. What happens to people? What happens if you don't want this?
Well, here's the thing. I think those are all really good points. You know, about 70%, 75% of all Coloradans vote by mail through absentee. But you have, a lot of folks who refuse to do that. And Democratic leadership has stripped those people of that choice. But some of your points are right. I mean, signature verification is pretty good here in Colorado. It's not perfect by any stretch. To some extent, you lose that community aspect of people, showing up on Election Day. So there are some problems.
Less than a minute. How are you going to deal with these laws? All this falls right on your lap.
Well, more than ever before, it's important for us to have the administrative systems in place and the human systems in place so that we're going to have as many informal and formal safeguards to minimize the problems that this law creates. So through good administration, I think we can minimize some of the problems. We can't eliminate them. And we're going to do our best to make the best of a bad situation.
I don't know how you're going to hold this together. And this has to be done by this fall's elections, correct?
I see no way that we're able to implement a statewide system that everyone can access without problems in 3.5 months. I don't think physically it's impossible, but we're going to do our best.
Better you than me. Best of luck to you. Hey, tell
you.
a friend about the Independence Institute. That's independenceinstitute.org. Listen for me on KHOW Radio, particularly Sunday afternoons. Tell a friend, and we'll see you next week.